for a long time, when people would say, "Where are you from?" I would go, "Where do I look like I'm from?" And would kind of choke, and
Mhm,
people would guess where I was from. I worked really hard to lose my foreign accent, and people knew there was something about my accent, but they couldn't pick it as anything. That was intentional. I'm going to speak English so well you won't be able to tell. That was intentional. Unintentionally, I named my kids American sounding names, but it was for protection of them. I didn't want them to experience some of the pain I'd experienced. And I was trying to fit in as best as I could, be as Americanized as I could. I think every person out there is trying to find belonging somewhere,
yes.
but belonging begins within. That's one of the big things that I learned. If you are uncomfortable in your own skin,
Mhm.
it's hard for you to find belonging somewhere else.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Arrivals. Today's guest is Helen Fagan, a transformational leadership scholar, executive coach, author, and founder of Helen Fagan and Associates. She's originally from Iran and immigrated to the US as a teenager and has spent decades helping leaders better understand themselves and their impact on others. Her work combines emotional intelligence, neuroscience, and leadership development. She's also the author of Lead Like People Matter and host of the Because People Matter podcast. In this conversation, we talk about immigration, belonging, the lessons that she learned through coaching thousands of leaders, and why she believes leadership begins with self-awareness. There's so much to learn from Helen, and I think you really enjoy this conversation. Let's get started. Helen, thank you again for doing this. I really appreciate your time and really admire your work. So I'm excited about this.
Thank you so much, Mariana. It's a pleasure to be here. And I feel like I'm also learning equally from you and the work that you're doing, and glad that your podcast exists.
Thank you. I do want to start with a topic that I don't want to ignore. Given the situation, what's happening in Iran, I want to ask you how you're doing and how it's affecting your work and your personal life.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking. It's hard. My mother lives in Iran, in Tehran. My brother trained as an orthopedic surgeon in the United States and then went back to teach in Tehran. And so he lives there. And I have lots of aunts, uncles, cousins that all live there in Tehran and different parts of Iran. So it's hard. Um, I would be lying if I didn't say it's a breeze or I don't think about it. In fact, I think about it a lot. And sometimes when I find myself laughing or enjoying something, there's a part of me that goes, "Oh my gosh, how can you do that when blank?" Right? And then I pause and I say, "Okay, that's not healthy. My mother wouldn't want me to not enjoy life. My family would want me to, yes, be caring and concerned, but at the same time, stop what I'm doing." So it's hard. For me, I learned a long time ago that you have to create space for your heart to feel what it needs to feel, to grieve, to have those moments of sorrow and pain, and for your head to say, "Okay, now it's time to move forward." My natural inclination historically has been, "I'm going to get through this, I'm going to survive," all of those things, but not ever giving space for my heart to feel the emotion, the pain, all of those things. That's my natural inclination. But I've learned that that's not healthy. And so I do my absolute best to create space for both of those. I spend a lot of time walking in nature. My office faces some trees and just a beautiful scenery. And I enjoy that. I am intentional about my gratitude journal every single morning, spending time with grandkids, just those things. I walk in nature. So I'm doing everything I know to do to remain healthy, both physically and mentally and emotionally. And at the same time, know that it's a heavy season. And so that's kind of where I am. So some days are better than others, and some days are harder than others.
I can even imagine. And thinking about your family, I'm sending you love. That's all I can.
You're Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it and I receive it. We all go through seasons where life is just incredibly hard.
Yeah.
And there's so much going on in the world right now. So many people I know are struggling in some way. And so, what we do, I believe the best thing we can do is to send each other love and to create space where we can, if I need to cry, I can cry. If I need to laugh, I can laugh, right? That's the only way we get through it. And to focus on today. What can I do today? What can I, what do I have control over? When I work with clients, um,
Mhm.
they're feeling like chaos, life is chaotic, or things are out of control. I like to use the analogy of a hula hoop. I say, imagine that the hula hoop around you. What's within the hula hoop are things you can control. What's outside the hula hoop are things you cannot control.
Hmm.
Bring your energy to focus on what's within the hula hoop, and that will help you to get through each day. And I I apply that to myself.
Very important thing to focus on. And it's easy to say that, but of course it's a tough practice. Helen, you have a very long, impressive curriculum, but I wanna know how you describe yourself in a couple sentences for people that don't know you today.
I'm an immigrant. I am both Iranian and American. I am a female executive. I'm a leader. I'm a business owner. I'm a mother. I'm a wife. I'm an Anna. I'm a podcast host. I'm an author, lifelong learner, lover of human beings.
Yeah. I love that description. And you and I met, well, part of it is because I discovered your book and your amazing coaching business that you have had for 11 years now, right?
So, yeah, yeah. Officially got the LLC in 2014, uh, but I was teaching at University of Nebraska Lincoln um, until 2024,
Mhm.
and went out on my own in 2024.
Yeah. And this is a part of your career that I'm really impressed, not only as an entrepreneur, but for what you do. And I want to understand that shift that you did from academia to starting your own company, the context that you were in your life, but also what really pushed you to say, I can do this. I can have my team, my business, and this really has a future for me as Helen Fagan and Associates.
Yeah. So I had been working in healthcare for a number of years. Most of my career had been spent in healthcare. And my last position, I created a cultural competence and diversity programs at a large health system in our community, 5,000 employees, multi sided, level two trauma center, and was doing that. And then I had a health issue come up in 2007 that led me to resign from that full-time position.
Mhm.
So went from healthcare, working in healthcare and the administrative side of things to just resigning from everything. I was serving on boards in our community. I was finishing up a master's degree, all sorts of things. And then I thought, okay, I just need to address this health thing. I need to figure out how to live. And my diagnosis was post traumatic stress disorder and severe clinical depression in 2007, which came as a total shock to me as a result of it being taken to the emergency room by a team member. But, anyways, I took time off. And before I resigned my full time position, the president of the college that was affiliated with the hospital, the health system, contacted me and said, Helen, would you be willing to create and teach a class on culture and how it affects health and illness for our nursing program, our undergrad program? And I said, yeah, but here's what's going on. I'm taking some time off and she said, that's fine. Whenever you're ready, no rush. I just would love to have your expertise knowledge as a course program. I said, okay. So I took that time off and eventually came back teaching that course while going through therapy. And my therapist and I were kind of figuring out, okay, what's the future going to look like? Now, how do I live in such a way where I can continue to contribute from a professional level in a way that was meaningful to me while honoring those things that I needed, which was flexibility and schedule and timing and structure and those types of things so that I could manage my health. And I said, I love to teach, I love to write. I'm trained as a coach, I love coaching. And so we kind of threw out this idea of, okay, why don't you just begin by creating that course and teaching it? You know,
Mhm.
that was kind of the first step, but I never had thought of myself as going into academia. Never thought of myself as being a business owner. While I was leading the programs at the health system, I was getting a lot of calls for speaking engagements and sharing with other hospitals because our programs were being innovative and recognized by Joint Commission and American Hospital Association and different organizations. And so I would go and I would do the speaking engagement or the training, and any funds that I earned, I would put it into our bank, our account for doing the programs we were wanting to do at the hospital. So
Mhm.
we wanted to get training for this group and we needed the funds. And so my speaking engagement would bring in the funds and then we'd fund the things we wanted to do. So that I used those funds in that way. Anyways, long story short, I end up finishing the master's degree and decide to go for a PhD. Like, I really like the teaching and I really like the coaching. Let me do both. So let me do both in a very, very, very part-time basis, right? So I'm
Mhm.
like really diving in full time, 80 hours a week. I couldn't do that. Physically, mentally, I was not in a space where I could do that. So that's how I ended up in academia. I basically, when I started my doctorate program, my advisor, who knew my reputation, my background, said, "Hey, Helen, we'll pay for your doctorate. If the university will pay for your doctorate, give you a stipend if you would consider teaching some of our undergraduate leadership courses." And
Mhm.
I thought, okay, that's great. So I handed over the course that I created at the hospital, their program, to someone else to teach, and they took off with it and were teaching it. And then I went on to teach in at University of Nebraska Lincoln, very part time again. I would take a class for my doctorate and I would teach a class. I'd take 2 classes, teach a class, that kind of thing. And so did that. I finished my doctorate in 2014, and that's when I decided to create my LLC. So my purpose was I'm going to finish my doctorate, I'm going to do coaching, and I'm going to teach maybe 1 class a semester. That was going to be
Okay.
like very part-time. So about 25, 30 hours a week was what I was thinking my life could handle. That led to me actually being asked to run a leadership program that the university had, and they wanted to expand it into my area of research. And I did that for a number of years. And then I had students that worked with me, graduate students that finished their programs and they went off. And so I went on to teach for 10 years at University of Nebraska, ran a program and, kind of coaching while I was doing it with my doctoral students, with my master's level students. I was really using my coaching with the people that were surrounding me, not for money earning, right? But every once in a while, I would get someone that would reach out and go, "Hey, I am an executive and I've heard about your coaching through such and such and such. I want to know, would you coach me?" And so I would take on a client here and there to coach. And the same thing with the speaking engagements. I would take on a speaking engagement here and there to do that. And then just things blew up. I got all of a sudden, I'm getting tons of requests. And I've had former students that graduated that are gone on and working in corporate America, and they're coming back and going, "Dr. Fagan, it really sucks out there.
Yeah.
We loved working with you. We loved learning. Would you keep teaching us? Would you help us?"
Mm.
And so kind of the idea in about 2022, I think it was 2023, the idea came to me that, hey, I'm going to be 60. Why don't I spend the last decade of my professional career using what I love, which is mentoring young people, my expertise to help these young women create their own consulting company?
Mhm.
And I had no desire for our company to be called Helen Fagan and Associates, but because of my name, had the person that we hired to do the brand study, she said, people know your name, they respect you, you're widely known and respected in the region, that type of stuff, and even on a global scale, because I'd done some teaching in Qatar and in Hiroshima University in different places. And so I said, keep the name Helen Fagan, make sure that's part of the name and make it associates. And so I brought it to the team. We discussed it and they're like, yes, yes, let's do it. So we launched Helen Fagan and Associates in 2024 with basically these former graduate students. And my intention was I would exit within a decade. I would retire by 70 and we would take this 10 years and we would build something together that then, I could turn around and sell to the employees. So the business would become employee owned.
Hmm.
And these young people who have learned how to develop leaders, what leadership is about, they had a passion for it. They had the experience, they had the expertise and the training that they could then deliver that. So that's why I set out to do that. Sorry for the long answer.
No, that's what I'm looking for. And I do wanna I think I understand part of it, but what is it about the business and people that come to you? What type of coaching it is that I know it's very rare, and I want to understand how you understand leaders and what is the end goal when they go into the coaching.
Yeah. So the way the theory, we've all, myself included, and team members have all studied leadership from Lao Tzu, so 3000 BC, to
Hmm.
present day leadership theory, right? We study different ideologies, philosophies around leadership. We've read the research, we've done the research, we've collected the data. And so our idea of leadership is there's a leader and then there's a leadership process, right? There's two distinct different things. Leaders are not just people who are in positions with a title like CEO, administrator, mayor, whatever. Leaders are individuals who influence others towards a common goal.
Hmm.
So you could be a leader but not have a title.
Yes.
And you could be a manager but not have leader attributes or understand skills of a leader
Hmm.
and how leaders impact others. One of the things that we believe is we use emotional intelligence, neuroscience, leadership development theory, and intercultural mindset. Those are our four core buckets and bring that together. So we help a leader to gain self awareness. Who are you? What makes you the person that you are? Because
Hmm.
from research, leaders who understand who they are can regulate how they impact other people often. So they understand, hey, I grew up in Mariana. I grew up in Mexico. My perception of a healthy work environment would be influenced by these factors. That's a part of who I am. And so what I expect from my team is going to be maybe different than someone who grew up in Boston,
Right.
right? Does not have that global lens. And so what we try to do is to get the leader to understand those parts of themselves
Hmm.
and the impact they have on other people.
Yes.
We begin there. That's the beginning step, right? We really try to dive in from that self awareness, self management angle.
Hmm.
We recognize that leaders who have the level of resilience and optimism and hope and self efficacy, those are called psychological capital. When a leader is high in all four of those, they operate differently. They create an environment where their team members feel seen and heard. and cared for, and they are more creative and achieve results. So we try to develop, we bring in activities, we bring in reflections, we bring in discussions around those things. We inform them about why their brain naturally will go to a specific space to address a situation and how they can train their brain to think differently. That's where we bring in the neuroscience. We bring in what we know about neuroplasticity and default setting. We bring that in and help inform the leader to say, there's nothing wrong with you.
Hmm.
This is your inclination.
Yeah.
You being aware of it is important. You knowing how to manage it gives you a superpower, basically.
Right. What is the usual reaction from your clients? Because I don't think this is a common practice, of course, that I imagine that 90% of leaders don't even know that they have to do this work. So when you come to them and you say, this is the first step, they're like, yes, sure. I'm just curious how
Yeah.
more people react.
Yeah. It really depends on the leader. But I'll tell you one thing, something that we've learned. There are There are individuals, and I won't call them leaders. There are individuals who come in expecting a checklist of things to run through. And I got to run through this checklist and then I'll be a better leader.
Hmm.
And we tell them, actually, that's not the case. There is no checklist.
Hmm.
There is the kind of work we're asking you to do is the work that you would do if you were a Olympic level athlete. You are training muscles. These are
Mm.
psychological, these are heart muscles, these are emotional muscles, these are thinking muscles. This is balancing logic and emotion. This is strategic thinking in your brain that is very different than a leader needs to be able to finish ABC task.
Hmm.
Did I
Yes.
get the timesheet done? Did the person bring in the sales? If they didn't bring in the sales, what do I do? That's not what we're teaching. That's
Hmm.
where we're going. There are others that do that and they do it well. What we want to do is focus on the person. That's where our emphasis is. Do you know who you are and why you do what you do? Do you know why you expect your employees to behave this way? Do you know when you communicate that way, what impact it has on the people that report to you? So those are the types of things that we engage in. And we do a fair amount of workshop type of training. So one of our clients right now has us working and we're doing a 4-hour training with all of their leaders, 100 people. They're going through our training, and our training is called Clear, Consistent, and Kind. And it's about holding people accountable, giving good feedback, being able to have crucial conversations. So we do that, we deliver that content, and we also tell those leaders that are going through that just because you know this does not mean you'll be able to do it well. The doing it well takes practice. And when you aren't doing it well, you need to reflect. You need to be able to pause and step back and think through this. So, if a leader chooses, which I will tell you, the executive team of this organization went through a year-long coaching development program with us.
Well,
So, about 17 people went through a year long of coaching and development with us. That's where we take the how do you give a crucial conversation and we unpack it with what makes it difficult for you to have the crucial conversation? How could you reframe that where we're developing those muscles with them just in time?
okay.
What we hear from our clients, and I'll give you an example of one specific client that comes to mind. He was on the executive team for this one organization I'm telling you about, and he was close to retirement. And when the CEO said, "Okay, everybody on the executive team is going to go through this year-long program," he's like, "I'm 6 months away from retirement. Do I have to go through it?" So he was very hesitant. He entered
Hmm.
the conversation with me hesitant, and he said, "I don't know." He said, "I'm doing it because my boss told me I have to." So I'm
Yeah.
here. And we go through the coaching. Very last coaching session, Mariana, he says to me, Helen, I wish I would have known this 50 years ago when I started my career.
Yes.
I would have been a different person. I probably would have been a better father.
Hmm.
I wish I would have known this even 30 years ago when I started being a supervisor. I know I would have been a better supervisor.
Yes.
But I'm glad I know it now, he said, because I know I'm going to be a better grandfather.
Hmm.
Kind of work we're doing isn't just about impacting the person in their workspace. The kind of work we're doing is about that person gaining insight about themselves and the way they want to impact those around them, regardless of whether that's in your professional sphere or your personal sphere, your life, whatever area that is. That's just one example.
Yes.
It's not uncommon for people to tell us that they come in with kind of being chaotic, not sure what they would get, and being totally surprised by what they gain and what they take away. That's not uncommon for us to hear.
I'm sure, because there are questions that have never consciously come up for them, I imagine. And just even thinking about it and reflecting on it, I'm sure there's a lot of realizations. And I think in your book, you touch a lot on these types of questions and you give a lot of reflection. And I'm curious if going through to your business, through coaching, that was also part of this needs to be more available in a book form, which I highly recommend to read. Was that the motivation to write this as well?
Yeah, so, anytime I would do a speaking engagement, I would get, "Hey, you should write a book. You
Yes.
should really tell your story. You should write a book."
Yep.
So that was kind of always in the back of my head. And then one of the things with, getting a PhD is you publish your dissertation, and peer reviewed journal is kind of the I would say the gold standard is where your academic advisor wants you to publish. I knew I wanted to publish it for anyone. And I knew peer review journal articles, while they are absolutely essential and necessary, they're not always available to the average person. And I wanted it to make it available to the average person, to the person who's maybe leading their children's school council, but hasn't had, they're the stay at home mom who's really cherishes being available to her kids, but also wants to be a leader in her children's school and wants support. I wanted that, to make it available in that way. I also wanted to make it available to someone who's maybe a book club leader,
Yeah.
right? That was the reason. So, yes, so the types of questions we would ask, there's questions at the end of the book. The type of questions that are asked at the end of the book are basically if you sit with them and answer them and maybe go through the book with a friend, you're basically having coaching experience doing it on your own. So that's the purpose behind why write the book, why put it in that way.
Yes. And you describe a lot of your life in the book and how you came to several realizations in your own life. I want to touch on one in particular for immigrants, and that we talked about the first time you and I talked, because I think it's important that a huge part of your life you maybe not consciously tried to hide, but you did hid a lot of who were you really were in the US. I know that's very specific experiences led you to change that, but how consciously for yourself you started applying a lot of the questions that we're talking about right now for your own life, and
Mhm.
how those practices led you to change that part of yourself.
Well, again, going back to the brain science, when we are experiencing pain as human beings, our default setting is to do everything we can to reduce the pain.
Hmm. Yes.
So, as a 15-year-old in a boarding school in Central Florida, the US hostage crisis has happened. And people all over the country are hating Iranians, right? Everywhere I turned, there was something that was being shared. Where on the radio, this was before social media, this was 1979. So on the radio, on the news, in newspaper, signs up in cities, different things, there was some level of hate being shared. And so for me, it was like, oh, well, you know, I don't have to admit to being Iranian. And again, that brain, while it wasn't conscious, it became a go-to mechanism for self-protection. And something that I think a lot of immigrants do. You try to fit in, you minimize unconsciously the ways that you're thinking, or you think, oh, there's got to be something wrong with me because I think this way, but everybody else thinks that way. You also have to understand age has a factor in that. I was 15. My sense is the need to hide my or fitting in would not have been as great had I been older, right? Because I would have been in the stage of like between the ages of, I would say, 10 and 16, maybe 18. You're trying to figure out who am I? And you want to and you want to be liked by a peer group. Think middle school, high school age kids and that. So there's this way of basically trying to massage yourself into a space of acceptance and belonging by people around you, right? So for me, that realization came through a couple of assessments I had taken and classes I had taken. And it was, oh my gosh, yeah. For a long time, when people would say, "Where are you from?" I would go, "Where do I look like I'm from?" And would kind of joke, and
Mhm.
people would guess where I was from. I worked really hard to lose my foreign accent, and people knew there was something about my accent, but they couldn't pick it as anything. That was intentional. I'm going to speak English so well you won't be able to tell. That was intentional. Unintentionally, I named my kids American sounding names, but it was for protection of them. I didn't want them to experience some of the pain I'd experienced. And I was trying to fit in as best as I could, be as Americanized as I could. And I feel like there's been a societal shift. You know, Back then, there was this pressure to fit in, to conform. There is still pressure to conform, but now not as much, right? Your accent is, depending on where it's from, it's a sexy accent. It's a nice thing. Or at least in my circle, what I experience is international people are loved and appreciated and welcomed, depending on, what's happening, right? So that conforming, although I would say in the last 5 years, there's been kind of a shift backward a little bit.
Yeah. Yes.
Right, there was a movement forward to where you could be accepted and loved for who you are, and then we've shifted backward, which is a very common in human consciousness shift. Human consciousness is kind of like a push and a pull. We grow this way and then we go back this way, and then we grow a little bit more and we go back. It's kind of like if you go back to slavery. It took almost 100 years where globally the sale of human beings from one continent to another was considered wrong, right? So we were not loading people up on a ship and moving them to be sold in another country. It began in England and then moved on to the United States eventually. So it's the same thing here, right? There's this human consciousness moving forward, human consciousness moving back. So we've seen that shift.
Mhm.
But that's really what happened. And I think every person out there is trying to find belonging somewhere,
Mhm.
but
Yes.
belonging begins within. That's one of the big things that I learned. If you are uncomfortable in your own skin,
Mhm.
it's hard for you to find belonging somewhere else.
I'm thinking how in your business, for example, in your coaching, you start with the person. That is usually the person that leads a team or has some sort of higher up role. When you talk to an immigrant or someone that doesn't even think of themselves as a leader, doesn't necessarily have to be an immigrant, but I just say that because uh, as an immigrant or people of color in general, we have this mindset that you're talking about that I might not be comfortable in my own skin because of a lot of things that we've been through. And right now that is very hard in the context that we're living as well. How do you talk to someone else about that coming from your own experience? How do you coach that type of person?
Yeah. Well, I don't bring my own experience into the coaching.
Hmm.
What I do often, and this is where coaching is different than, say, mentoring or consulting. As a coach, my client, underlying belief that I have is that my client is intelligent, resourceful, and whole. There's nothing wrong with them. I'm not here to fix them. They have a goal they want to get to in their life, and I'm here to help support them in getting there. So I ask questions and I listen for things they say as well as things they don't say. I listen for and I observe for when is it when they're talking, their energy seems to go up, the light seems to come on for their in their eyes, or things they seem to hesitate or hold back. And I make those observations and I ask questions to get them to understand. So if a client says, I just have to, dress the part. I just have to look the part in
Hmm.
order to succeed in this environment. I will tell them, what is success for you if you were not in the environment? What would be success for you then? How would you show up differently if it wasn't in that environment? And what is it that you really want to accomplish?
Hmm.
So basically, what I'm doing is I'm helping peel back the layers of is it more important for me to be comfortable in my own skin, or is it more important for me to fit in? And for some clients, it's more important for them to fit in.
Yeah.
I'm never going to push them towards this other thing because that's what I see. It's what they want. So that's the thing that makes coaching different. And coaching isn't therapy.
Hmm.
So if someone has some deep rooted trauma or issues, I can't diagnose, I can't treat. I'm not a counselor, I'm not a therapist. I will refer them. I will make observation and say, it appears based on your actions and based on what you're saying, there are some things that you need to process that the support of a therapist may help you.
Hmm.
How do you
Yeah.
feel about that?
Hmm.
And I would guide them to get that support. What I want to do is to help them to achieve their goal, whatever that is. So if, Mariana, if you say, I want to be a top, 1% podcast, and I want to give voice to immigrants, refugees, people of color, my question for you would be, how does being top 1% podcast, how does giving voice, how does that meet your ultimate goal in life?
Yeah.
What is your goal? What is that? Not suggesting that your goal can't change a decade from now, but what is it you really want right now? And what is it that getting this thing will help you get that thing?
Yes. And I'm curious what that goal is for you.
I'm at the end of this professional life, right? My my goal has always been about supporting individuals. And I would tell you, I went back and read some of my own report cards from when I was like 10 years old, 12
Hmm.
years old, read the report card, and it said, Helen is a good friend to everyone, but she talks too much in class. I chuckled and I would go, little did that teacher know someday I would get paid for my talking. What it did inform me of is I've always been about other people. I've always been my ultimate goal has been to support others, be whether that is support as in giving someone a push, support as in holding space, support as in encouraging new learning, growth, whatever that is. I do it every day with my kids and my grandkids. I can't turn it off. It's who I am. And I love that I'm in this season of my life where I'm living that. So I wanna in this latter part of my life, in terms of professionally, not that I'm gonna die or anything, but, like, professionally, this last decade, I want to create success for my team,
Yeah.
right? And that is my ultimate goal.
Yeah. And you have supported so many people definitely accomplish that. And you're a great speaker. And I do want to touch on both of your 10 talks, which now are between the two of them are 13 years apart.
Mhm.
And the most recent one just came out, which is very good. And I'm curious on the difference that you see between the two of them. And you, in the first one, you say many things that you say in the book as well about your own personal experience and things that happen specifically in hospitals that changed the how your career. And then the most recent one, you focus more on what we're talking about leadership. How do you see yourself now that you look at both of those very impactful talks? What will you change or not? I'm just curious on how you perceive them.
Yeah. They are 2 very different talks,
Hmm.
first of all. I use myself as a case study in the book, right? In the book, I talk about I'm a leader on the journey, just like anybody else.
Hmm.
I want I'm open about my failings. I'm open about the lessons I learned, and it's this idea of I got up and I did it again, and I learned and I made a mistake and I got up and I did it again, and I got up and I did it again, right? And so my hope is the reader realizes you don't have to execute on being a leader perfectly every time. And we all fail as human beings. It's okay. It's how do we admit to our failings? How do we redirect? How do we grow? How do we learn? How do we move forward? Right. So that was the purpose, kind of me using myself in the book. First TED talk. And it just kind of was like a joke. I was talking to a friend. I was in the middle of my doctoral program and was continuing with my therapy. And I said to my friend, she and her husband were organizers of the TED Talk, and we were having lunch. And I said, wouldn't it be funny if I did a TED Talk called Diagnosed with PTSD and MDD and Managing to Get a PhD? And her eyes lit up.
Mm.
You got to do it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no, no, I'm not doing it. Anyways, she wore me down, talked me into it. And so the purpose of giving the talk was you can have these diagnoses, but it doesn't have to limit your life. You do need to take time. You do need to do what you need to do to be healthy, and you can pursue your dreams, right? And at the same time, I wanted a different perspective of someone from Iran to be on the screen, right? This
Mhm.
different idea of Iranians are. So that was the purpose. Second TED Talk, was just last year. I've done the dissertation, I've done the research, continuing to do the consulting, continuing to do the coaching, things we've learned from the teaching, the research and everything. And really, one of the key issues I see is leaders don't want to take time to slow down and learn and grow. And what they're expecting is human beings to operate like machines. And that is creating a chronic issue in the workplace of burnout, exhaustion, of not feeling good enough. And so I had been seeing this and sensing this. And I wanted to get the message across that your brain isn't set up for that. And this whole frustration we see with people who are not like us, it's because we're expecting ourselves to operate like machines, and that's not human. We're humans are not machines. Just because your phone got an update, you know, last night and it's now fixing its bugs doesn't mean because you went to sleep, you read a book that you're going to wake up and be perfect at execution of whatever it was you read in this book.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
we expect human beings to operate that way. And when we're moving at such a fast pace on fumes, we're being pulled in so many different directions. The worst of humanity is on display.
Yeah.
We
Yes.
back by we hurt each other. We don't create space for each other. And that defeats everything we want to accomplish, both in organizations and societally. So this was my kind of insights I've gained in years of doing this work. So very different, right? One is personal.
Mhm.
One is very much geared towards the leaders, the team member.
Yeah.
The other big difference is when you watch the TED Talks, this is a funny story, is there's an 80-pound difference in Helen. And I'll tell you how that came to be, which is really
Yeah.
wild. I was looking for a new physician. My physician was retiring. This was about 6, 7 years ago, I guess. I was looking for a new physician, and I've worked in healthcare long enough to where I'm gonna interview the physician before I allow him access to my body, right? So I go in and I'm interviewing this physician, and he's trying to get to know me, and I'm trying to get to know him. And he says, "Okay, so let me make sure I understand this right. You have a PhD, you train leaders, you study leaders." He looks at me, plain and simple, and he says,
Mhm.
"You're gonna lead your own way out of obesity." In my head, I said not nice words. "F you, whatever, who do you think" that's what's going on inside of my head. But as I left his office, I was like, "He's right. He's right. How am I leading myself into health? How am I embodying physical and mental health fully?" And so I worked with a health coach and really 5 years of intentional hard work with a health coach, really knowing why do I eat? When do I eat? How's my emotions impacting my eating? What are the decisions I'm making about food? All of those things, right? Here I'm coaching leaders to think about these things that affects their leadership, and I am going through this coaching thing that's affecting my food consumption and my body. So that's one of the big differences that you see that I've never talked about, but I just thought it was that for people who might watch both of them
Yeah.
might want to
Um,
know.
I think no, I want to pause there because I think that's I noticed that very specific experiences that you go through really impact how you change. And this might sound obvious. I of the stories that you tell in the book and things that have happened to you, you really take them to make a huge change. I mean, I'm saying this because a lot of people would be like, "Ah, I'm just going to ignore this person. Why would I take that opinion and with me? It's just someone that is judging the way that I look." But you really reflect on it and took it.
He spoke truth.
Yeah.
He spoke truth. It wasn't pleasant to hear. I will tell you, it was nice to hear. Yeah, and there was a piece of me that was disgusted, but when I stopped and looked at it, I've always been of a, Helen, before you teach it, before you write about it, before you train someone about it, you gotta be living it.
Yeah.
That's the authenticity piece for me. I can't expect others to go down paths that I myself am not willing to go down.
Very true.
If I'm saying, "Hey, this is good for you," then why am I not doing it?
Right. Yeah.
So that's the thing. He spoke truth. Okay, he isn't my physician. I will tell you that.
Mhm.
I didn't
Yeah.
choose, right? It's not like I'm a glutton for punishment. Someone who's yes, he spoke truth. I took his words. I gave it space, thought about it, and said, "What part of this do I want to address and own and move forward with?" And that yeah, I did that, but I'm not sitting in it and letting myself think of myself any less because of that, nor do I allow myself to think less of anyone who was Helen in 2012, 80 pounds heavier,
Hmm.
less because of that. You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I'm not allowing that. But one of the things that I learned from that is when we speak truth to people, it can be a freeing thing if we're doing it with kindness and non-judgmental.
Do you think he did it with kindness when he said
I don't
that?
think he did it with kindness. I don't think he even gave 2 thoughts about it, but I do it with kindness.
Hmm. Yes.
I I do it with kindness, and I took his words with kindness towards myself.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
while he didn't say it with kindness, I wasn't allowing the harshness of it to land in my head and my heart. I didn't internalize the harshness. I internalized the truth of what do I want? How do I want to show up?
Yeah.
And for
Yeah.
me, the reason I lost the weight, my why, when my health coach told me to write down my why, I want to dance with my grandsons at their wedding.
Mhm.
They are 4, 5, and 8. So I got a ways to go. I got to live a long while yet to dance at their weddings.
Yeah.
And that was my why. I want to dance with my grandkids at their weddings. I want to be able to get down on the ground and play and not be achy and hurting. I wanna have
Hmm.
an active and full life, and I wanna enjoy this season of my life, so that's why.
Yeah.
It didn't have
Uh,
anything to do with what he said.
yeah. Yes. No, yeah, I just really admire how you learn from those experiences. I'm curious also how everything you've learned and you have applied to your own family. I mean, how do you teach all of this to your kids? So do your kids know how you help people and know a lot of the things that you talk about in the book? And maybe your grandkids, of course, at one point will also learn a lot from you. Do they see everything that you've done?
Yeah, I have 2 sons. One will be 40 this year, one will be 36 in a couple of weeks this year. Both of them have been there during my graduations, during when I did my dissertation defense, they got to hear my research. I drag them along to things. My youngest son, one of the first very large speaking engagements I had was to the American Trauma Nurses Association conference in New Orleans. And he was 13 years old. And I said, okay, it's a mom and son trip. They're going to go with me. And he
Mhm.
sat in that auditorium listening to what I was sharing.
Mm.
So I've always brought them along. And I use coaching questions to ask them when they want to know my ideas or thoughts on something. So I use the approach. I share, I'm a teacher at heart. If I learn something new, I want to share it with people. All of my daughter in laws have heard me speak at different events and different functions. I've written about my grandkids, my sons in the book. I've written the pieces of their stories that were my piece of the story. I've not told their story from their perspective. I've got permission from them to share what I share in the books about them. So they know, they see. I don't want to say, they have both said to me, we're so proud of you, mom, right? They've said that, but I don't want to say, hey, I'm somebody they endeavor to be or look up to or anything like that, because that's their words. It's for them to say those things. I don't want to say that, but um, I believe they've watched and they've learned. When our youngest son was going to be a father, he wrote a letter to my husband and I, said, thank you for raising me to be the man that I am. Mom, thank you. I'm proud to be the son of an immigrant. And dad, I'm proud to be the son of a veteran. And thank you for teaching me this and this and this. There's no way I could ever pay you back for everything you've given me in my life. I hope making you grandparents is a gift that you will accept." That's how he told us he was going to be a dad. That's and that was our first grandchild. So, there's things that our sons have said to us, and there's ways that they've demonstrated to us how appreciative they are for the struggles they've seen us go through, the life that we've tried to create for them, the mistakes that we have made in parenting them, and, the places where we've apologized and said, "Forgive us, we messed up, and we hope you learn and you do better," those kinds of things. I mean, so we've been very open. I would say we have a very close relationship with
Hmm.
sons and their spouses, and we vacation together, we travel together, so
Yeah.
and I love that.
Yeah.
So I think they know. I
Yeah.
hope they know. I've never hid any of it from them. I feel like, their mom was in school pretty much their whole life. They were child of a student. I joke that I gave up television for about 20 years because I would just use my time to study and take classes and those things.
Have they ever been to Iran or?
They have not ever been to Iran. We've as far as they've been is to Turkey. My
Hmm.
mom's side of the family, my grandmother was there, all my aunts and uncles were there with their kids, and we had a family reunion, about 30 of us, came from all over. I had a cousin who was living in Malaysia at the time, and my mom's youngest brother, he and his wife live in England with their kids. They came from England. He arranged everything. And, my husband and I and our sons were I think one was 18 and one was like 22. And
Hmm.
that's the closest that they have been to Iran. We hope with the change in government that all of us would be able to travel and to see that. Both of them have their name tattooed in Farsi on their arms, my name tattooed on their arms in Farsi, and so both of them know about the culture, have connected with family, and both of them have said, "Mom, why didn't you teach us Farsi?" So, but yeah, they haven't been.
Um, I want to finalize with one question, Helen. What makes you more happy today? And it can be little things, big things.
There's a bird sitting in a tree right outside my window right this second that has been chirping during the whole time we've been recording. I'm guessing you're not gonna hear it. You haven't been able to hear it. But it's like there's this song that's going on outside, and just being alive to hear this, to be present in this moment, to connect with you, to have this conversation, it's great, great joy, great joy.
Thank you. Same for me. And I want to spread the work that you do as much as possible because I admire it a lot and invite whoever who's listening to really, really dig into the very important questions that you make us ask ourselves that I want to dig in more for my own purposes as well in life.
Well, thank you for reaching out and connecting. I'm happy to connect with people. I appreciate the work that you're doing and the joy that you bring to the world.
Thank you. How can people reach out to you, Helen, if they wanted to?
Yeah, Helen at helenfagan.com is my email. They can connect with me on LinkedIn, website, helenfagan.com. Um, our podcast is called Because People Matter.
Hmm.
Listen episodes there. Find the book Lead Like People Matter on Amazon, other places. Yeah, lots of places to reach out to me. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook if people wanna reach out there.
Thank you so much, Helen.
You
Sending you
bet.
love, like I said at the beginning.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, please consider following the podcast, leave a review, and share it with someone who might connect with Helen's story as well. You can learn more about Helen's work through her book, Lead Like People Matter, her coaching practice, and her podcast, Because People Matter. I'll leave the links in the episode description. And again, thank you for being here. I'm Mariana, and I'll see you in the next episode.